If you are still trading time for money in an AI economy, you are not just behind, you are actively being replaced. Every single minute you spend endlessly scrolling is a direct transfer of wealth from your future into the retirement funds of the creators you binge. Welcome to AI Market Mint.
Turn AI into income. Turn knowledge into freedom. Your digital HQ for smart wealth creation.
Look, we are dealing with a massive silent leak in the modern bank account today. Most of us treat the internet like this giant free amusement park.
Right, but the admission fee is just quietly deducted from your potential. It is wild to watch.
Exactly. Sitting on the sidelines right now is not just lazy, it is straight up financial sabotage.
I mean, the chronic consumer is just completely exhausted. You are running endlessly on a treadmill that ultimately powers someone else's house.
Yeah, you're the product being sold to advertisers rather than the one actually capturing the value.
Exactly. The producer reaps the energy and the capital, while the consumer just gets tired. And deep down, you know you are falling behind.
Oh, absolutely.
You see others leveraging new tools, building digital assets, achieving independence, while you remain just glued to the bleachers.
Listen, I have to confess something. I looked at my phone's screen time report this morning, and it was honestly horrifying.
Oh no, what was the number?
4 hours. 4 hours of casual consumption yesterday? I mean, I spent 45 minutes watching a guy power wash a driveway.
Yeah, the power washing videos get everyone. It is that instant satisfaction.
Right. My brain felt busy. I got this little dopamine hit seeing the clean concrete, but my net output to the world was zero. I just handed my non-renewable time to a guy making ad revenue off my attention.
You literally paid for his new equipment with your focus. That video is the perfect microcosm of the trap.
It really is.
You traded a non-renewable asset, your time, for the absolute cheapest, lowest grade dopamine available. But to understand why intelligent people volunteer for this uneven trade, we have to look at how society engineered that exact reflex.
You were trained to do this. I'd argue it goes all the way back to the early industrial revolution.
Oh, for sure.
The education system wasn't built to create free thinkers or, digital entrepreneurs. The literal school bell was designed to mimic the factory bell.
Right. The system needed compliant workers, people who could sit still, follow instructions, execute repetitive manual tasks.
And then take their wages and spend them buying the exact goods they just produced. It was a perfectly closed loop of extraction.
And as we transitioned into a service economy, that machinery of extraction didn't disappear. It just became psychological.
Yeah, instead of factory bosses dictating your output, we got algorithms dictating your input.
Exactly. The machinery just moved from the factory floor directly into our pockets. Tech giants spent billions optimizing these platforms to monetize human focus.
Right, because attention is the ultimate scarce resource. They want you relaxed, slightly numb, and endlessly consuming. But the people actually building wealth are using algorithmic leverage.
Wait, Ollie. Algorithmic leverage sounds technical. What does that actually mean for a normal person?
Simple. It just means using software to multiply your effort infinitely without burning any extra calories. Imagine it like planting one single apple seed, and a piece of code automatically plants that same seed in a million other fields simultaneously.
The initial work is identical, but the yield is exponentially massive. That really is the dividing line of the modern economy.
But look, I have to push back on that a bit. Historically, owning the field required massive upfront capital.
Right, you needed a literal factory.
Yeah, a physical storefront, a complex supply chain, employees, insurance. Becoming a producer used to mean taking on catastrophic financial risk.
But that is legacy thinking, and it is the biggest mental block keeping people poor today. The cost of distribution has plummeted to absolute zero.
That's true.
You can broadcast a product, a service, or an idea to the entire globe from a $500 laptop on a free Wi-Fi connection. The gatekeepers are gone.
Yet, despite this unprecedented access, 99% of society still voluntarily chooses to remain in the consumer seat.
Because it is entirely cognitive now. We have to look at the biology of consumption. Consuming is biologically easy. It conserves energy.
While producing requires burning calories, it requires delaying gratification.
And perhaps most terrifyingly, it requires facing the objective rejection of the open market. The human brain is hardwired to avoid social rejection. Scrolling avoids all of that.
Let's look at a very specific real-world scenario of how this destroys a career. Take Rahul.
Okay, let's talk about Rahul.
Rahul is a senior freelance graphic designer. For 7 years, he was perfectly comfortable. He did minimalist logos for independent coffee shops.
A classic gig.
Right. He charged $800 a pop, used standard design software, and took 2 weeks of back and forth emails to deliver the final files. Then he'd kick back and watch Netflix.
So Rahul was a producer of manual labor, but he was still a consumer of systems.
Exactly.
He never built an audience. He never productized his knowledge into templates or courses. He relied entirely on the incoming flow of client requests.
He was essentially a well-paid factory worker operating in the digital space, and then generative AI hits the market.
Oh, and everything changes.
Suddenly, that coffee shop owner realizes they don't need 2 weeks and $800. They type a prompt into an AI generator and get 50 high-quality variations in 10 seconds for a fraction of a cent.
Yeah, Rahul's incoming requests probably dropped by 80% in 3 months.
He was completely blindsided. His entire business model evaporated overnight. He assumed his manual skills would always hold the exact same market value simply because they paid his rent last year. He was basically destroyed by status quo bias.
Wait, Ollie, status quo bias sounds technical. What does that actually mean for a normal person?
Simple. It just means suffering from the dangerous illusion of permanence. Imagine it like driving on a highway and assuming the road will never curve just because the last 10 miles were straight.
He preferred the instant gratification of a predictable paycheck over the discomfort of building a scalable system.
This feeds directly into a really dangerous trap that I see constantly: the illusion of educational consumption.
Oh, where people think they're being productive just by watching content?
Yes, you see people watching 500 hours of finance videos or endless tutorials on how to code. They think, well, I'm not just scrolling memes, I'm learning.
But watching a tutorial triggers a dopamine release that feels exactly like progress.
Oh,
If you never deploy capital, if you never write a script, if you never launch a product,
your net output to the world is exactly zero. You are just a highly educated consumer.
overcoming that fear requires a fundamental shift in how you view your own labor. You have to understand that the initial output you create is going to be terrible.
It always is.
And that terrible output is the mandatory toll you pay to cross the bridge to actual competence. People are terrified of the market's feedback loop.
Because the market is ruthlessly objective. But avoiding that feedback guarantees stagnation. Let's look at what crossing that bridge actually looks like. Take Sarah.
The copywriter.
Right. Sarah was a mid-level copywriter, writing email sequences for software startups. She was facing the exact same existential threat from AI that Rahul was facing.
But she didn't panic. And she didn't cling to her keyboard. She took a completely different path.
She recognized that the economic value was no longer in manually typing the words. The value had shifted to directing the systems that write the words.
Exactly. She transitioned into an AI operator. Instead of writing one email sequence for one client, she built a master AI prompt.
A framework that analyzes any startup's landing page and instantly generates a highly optimized email sequence.
Based on a decade of her own psychological copywriting expertise, she packaged that prompt chain, put it on a digital storefront, and sold it for $50 to thousands of startups globally.
This perfectly illustrates the core lesson of the modern economy. AI is simply a tool to amplify producers' intent.
Right. If you lack intent, if you are trapped in that passive, order-taking consumer mindset, AI will just replace you. But if you have producer intent, AI makes you completely unstoppable.
Think about the mechanics of that. AI is heavy construction machinery. If you are just a manual bricklayer who insists on carrying bricks by hand, the machine is going to take your job.
There is no competing with a bulldozer.
None. But if you shift your mindset to become the architect and the operator, that exact same machine allows you to build a skyscraper in the time it used to take you to build a backyard shed.
You move from supplying the labor to directing the leverage. And while that psychological shift is incredibly powerful, the ultimate urgency to make this change actually comes down to brutal underlying mathematics.
Oh, the math is completely rigged. Let's look at how wealth is calculated for a consumer versus a producer.
The math of the consumer relies on a linear income equation. You trade 1 hour of your time for 1 unit of currency.
But the moment you receive that currency, it is immediately attacked on two fronts. First, brutal upfront taxation.
Before you even pay your rent or buy groceries, the system takes its cut off the top.
Second, compounding inflation. The actual cost of living, housing, healthcare, education historically doubles every decade.
It is a leaky digital wallet. It's like carrying water in a bucket with a hole in it.
And every single year, the government makes that hole 3% wider. Your cost of survival is compounding, while your linear salary might increase by a mere 3% a year.
You are walking up a down escalator that is constantly speeding up.
And to make matters worse, consumers take that diminished, heavily taxed capital and exchange it for depreciating assets. Cars that lose thousands in value the second you drive them off the lot.
Electronics that are functionally obsolete in 24 months.
It is just terrible capital allocation.
Wait, Ali. Capital allocation sounds technical. What does that actually mean for a normal person?
Simple. It just means acting like a military general with your resources. Imagine it like deciding exactly which battlefield to send your troops to for the easiest victory, instead of just letting them get wiped out on a losing front.
Now contrast that entirely with the math of the producer. A digital producer creates an asset once. A masterclass, a software script, an AI prompt library like Sarah built.
The cost to produce it is primarily just focused time, but once it is created, the marginal cost to replicate and distribute that asset to a million people is practically zero.
The risk is strictly capped at the time you invested, but the financial return is theoretically infinite, and we cannot ignore the tax inversion.
Right, producers and business owners operate in a completely different reality. They are taxed only on their net income.
They deduct the cost of their infrastructure, their software subscriptions, their home office, before the government takes a single dime.
The consumer pays taxes immediately and tries to survive on what is left. The producer spends what they need to grow and only pays taxes on the remainder.
Consider the trajectory of two different people over a 10-year horizon. Person A saves $10,000 in a standard savings account, getting maybe 2% interest.
Because of inflation, they are actively losing purchasing power every single day. They are gripping a block of melting ice and hoping it keeps them hydrated.
Meanwhile, person B takes that exact same $10,000 and allocates it into a digital business. They buy professional analytics software, they run targeted ads, they build a digital storefront.
Even if the immediate financial returns are modest, Person B is building sellable equity. They're capturing email addresses, building an audience, establishing a brand footprint.
Person B is building a fortified digital castle, while person A is just watching their safety net melt into a puddle.
The compounding effects of this math create two drastically different futures. And those futures are not a distant science fiction concept. They are rapidly approaching right now.
The comfortable middle ground we all grew up expecting is evaporating into a completely bifurcated society.
So let's talk about future one. You ignore the warning. You treat AI as a neat party trick, generate a few funny images, and stay in the comfortable consumer seat.
Eventually, enterprise AI rolls into your company. Management realizes 3 AI operators can do the work of 20 manual employees, and your department is permanently downsized.
You are forced into the global gig economy, competing against the entire world for fractions of your required income. You become completely dependent on shrinking government safety nets.
That is the grim reality of staying passive. But Future 2 is where the actual opportunity lies. In Future 2, you embrace the discomfort of being a beginner today.
You build a digital footprint. You identify the glaring inefficiencies in your specific industry, and you prototype solutions using AI.
Fast forward 10 years. Your income is completely decoupled from your time. You wake up to digital sales made while you were sleeping in another time zone.
You possess ultimate geographical and financial freedom simply because you own the asset. What is truly fascinating is that the gap between these two futures isn't dictated by luck.
No, it isn't dictated by inheritance or what school you went to. It is a conscious, strategic decision regarding how you interact with digital systems. Are you the product being mined for attention, or are you the owner capturing the value?
Motivation is great, but motivation fades by next Tuesday when your boss yells at you or your kid gets sick. If you want Future 2, you cannot rely on willpower. You need a structural framework.
The execution starts with a very uncomfortable, ruthless audit of your screen time. You have to mandate a strict 1-to-1 ratio.
So for every single hour you spend consuming content, even educational content like an advanced Excel macro tutorial, you must spend 1 hour producing.
Precisely. Output must match input. You apply the concept in a spreadsheet, you draft a content summary, you prototype a tool. That is step 1.
And step 2.
Step 2 is mastering digital distribution, getting your ideas and products in front of thousands of eyeballs. Imagine owning a digital highway where you control the billboards instead of just driving past them.
To build that highway, you need professional infrastructure. You need tools that remove the emotional guesswork from your production. For example, using analytics platforms like vidIQ.
You don't just guess what people want to watch or buy. vidIQ literally shows you the exact search volume and competition metrics for your specific niche.
You might think you want to make a product about general finance, but the data shows that is oversaturated. Instead, the analytics tell you that 50,000 people a month are searching for automated tax spreadsheets for freelance photographers.
And there are only 3 videos on the entire internet answering that query. That data is your mandate. You are supplying exactly what the market is begging for.
But capturing attention without conversion is just vanity metrics. 1 million views on a video do not pay your mortgage if there is no transaction. You have to route them to a personally owned ecosystem.
Which is why Shopify acts as the gold standard storefront. It handles secure transactions, manages inventory, and executes digital delivery.
Look, people fail because they don't have these systems.
Yeah.
They try to duct tape free tools together, the links break, and they lose the customer.
Yeah, the tool simplifies the entire execution. Shopify handles all of it without you ever lifting a finger. Just plug it in and let it run.
We've put the official verified links in the pinned comment below. Don't go searching randomly and get scammed. Use the ones we've checked.
Right, because when you launch a digital product on that infrastructure,
Right.
you are essentially deploying a digital employee that works 24/7.
It never asks for a sick day, it never complains about office politics, and it scales infinitely. Someone in Tokyo can buy your tax spreadsheet at 3 in the morning your time, and the system delivers it seamlessly.
You wake up wealthier than when you went to sleep. The technology is practically free compared to the leverage it gives you. The only actual barrier left is the psychological hurdle of setting up the systems.
The digital economy is a zero-sum game of attention. Every single day you wait to build your own digital assets is another day you spend enriching the massive platforms that are actively building algorithms to replace you.
The tools are incredibly accessible. The knowledge is abundant. The only variable left is your personal execution. The era of the passive, comfortable middle class is officially over.
Survival now requires transitioning from consuming the world to constructing your own.
You can either build your own systems or you will be happily consumed by someone else's.
So before we wrap up this deep dive, look closely at your own specific day job right now. What is one glaring inefficiency or one manual, repetitive task that you could personally solve with an AI tool, package into a digital framework, and start distributing to others before someone else beats you to it?
The field is completely wide open right now. It is time to step onto it.
Don't let the future leave you behind. Start earning.